being here today. The topic of my lecture is Flausino Vale and his Preludes for solo violin, a window into the soul of Brazilian Caipira culture. Brazilian composer Flausino Vale created a distinctive compositional style that truly represents the Brazilian essence, a mixture of African, indigenous, and European cultures. He drew inspirations from his country's nature, landscape, folk traditions, and religious rituals, which combined with his extensive knowledge of the violin, resulted in the creation of 26 preludes for solo violin. Today, we'll explore what Caipira music is and how the composer portrays this genre of Brazilian folk music in his works, more specifically Preludes number 1, 11, 12, 15, and 24. Vale was born in 1894 in the city of Barbacena, located in the state of Minas Gerais, which you can see in red in the map. He was born into a musical family. His father played the clarinet and his mother played the piano. He learned the violin from another family member, his uncle Juan Augusto de Campos. In 1922, Vale graduated from law school and started working as a lawyer. In that same year, he started composing the 26 preludes for solo violin, even though he had no formal training in composition. He also worked as a professor of music history at the conservatory in the city of Belo Horizonte from 1927 until the end of his life. Besides the 26 preludes for solo violin, Vale also wrote 5 pieces for violin and piano, 5 pieces for voice and piano, 5 arrangements for orchestra, 1 solo piano piece, 5 works for choir, 1 piece for flute and piano, and 54 arrangements and 27 revisions for solo violin. Throughout his life, Vale was a very active violinist. He played in several orchestras and presented many recitals. Besides all these professions, he was also a researcher of Brazilian folk music. His love for popular festivities, rural culture, and nature resulted in trips throughout the country, where he collected information about different people's music and traditions. This research resulted in the publication of his book, Elements of Brazilian Folk Music, in 1936. One fun fact is that Vale met Brazil's most famous composer, Heitor Villa-Lobos, in a trip to Rio, and Villa-Lobos nicknamed Vale the Brazilian Paganini. Before we dive into the preludes, we need to become more familiar with the musical genre that influenced Vale the most, Caipira music. Caipira is a genre of Brazilian music associated with the rural life of the southeast and midwest regions of the country. It is Brazilian country music. Its roots go back to the colonization period, when the Portuguese imposed their culture and traditions on the indigenous and Afro-Brazilian populations. Colonial practices included the teaching of Western European music. So the Portuguese brought with them their most popular instrument, viola de mano, which you can see at the top picture. This instrument in other countries evolved into the modern guitar, but in Brazil it became the viola caipira, the instrument closely tied to the identity of Caipira music. The standard instrumentation of this genre is a voice duo and a viola caipira. The singers are always a third apart. Parallel thirds are such a determining characteristic of the style that they're literally called terças caipiras, which translates to Caipira thirds. Besides that, the lyrics are more important than the melody, so the composers use simple melodies. The state of Minas Gerais, where Vale was born and lived his entire life, is known for being the home of the caipiras, hence the huge influence of this genre in his works. Caipira music has changed a lot since the 1950s. Therefore, Vale's Preludes preserve a musical style that is unique to Brazil during the first half of the 20th century. Here I have a sample of Caipira duo from the early 1920s. Vale's 26 preludes are short virtuosic pieces that range from 40 seconds to about 3 minutes in duration, that at all times make reference to the popular rural universe so characteristic of the state of Minas Gerais. They were composed between 1922 and sometime in the 1940s. The full title of these works actually translates to 26 characteristic and concertante preludes for solo violin. The use of the word characteristic relates to the use of characteristic elements of folk culture. The word concertante, according to the Grove Dictionary of Music, signifies music that's in some sense soloistic or concerto-like. This reveals the composer's intentions of having these works performed as showpieces, either separately or as a set, as he had done himself in his recitals. There is only one edition of these works published by São Paulo Symphony Publisher. And there are only 2 recordings of them, one from 1984 by Polish-Brazilian violinist Jerzy Milewski. He recorded 21 of the preludes. And in 2011, Brazilian violinist Cláudio Cruz recorded all of the preludes. The first prelude we will look into today is number 1, titled Batuki. It was composed in 1922, and Batuki actually means an Afro-Brazilian dance that originated from Angola and Congo. Here is a sample of the dance. As you could see, Batuki is danced in a circle with one couple in the middle, and it's accompanied only by percussion instruments. The rhythms of this dance were incorporated into Caipira music, hence the composer's familiarity with this traditional dance. The prelude starts with an introduction in pizzicato. In the dance, this section is called baixão, and it's played by the percussion instruments. Vale followed the dance tradition by making the baixão, the introduction, percussive. Vale also imitates the percussion instruments by using ricochet bow stroke and left-hand pizzicato. Vale adds a footnote stating that this prelude must be played in 40 seconds, even though he does not add a metronome marking. It is not about showing how fast one can play, but portraying how festive and percussive Batuki dance is. Just like we study the origins and traditions of Baroque dances for a better understanding of Bach's music, it is also important to study the roots of Brazilian dance music to understand Vale's works. We are very fortunate to have a recording of the composer himself playing this prelude from 1931. It is truly fascinating to see his improvisatory approach, as well as the exaggerated percussiveness of the ricochet and left-hand pizzicato in his playing. The next prelude we will look into today is number 11, titled Casamento na Roça, which translates to Wedding in the Countryside. This prelude was composed in 1933, and it is a festive and playful representation of a traditional Caipira wedding. There are two evident influences of Caipira music in this work: the rustic theme and the use of parallel thirds. There is also evidence of indigenous influence of indigenous music. In his book Elements of Brazilian Folk Music, Vale states that one of the striking features of indigenous music is the use of quarter-tone tuning inflections. In this prelude, Vale asks for quarter-tone tuning inflections on B sharps and C flats. These notes show up from measures 20 through 27 in a very fast chromatic section to be played with jeté bow stroke, in which the bow bounces by being thrown on the string. All these details make the quarter-tone tuning inflections barely audible, so it's possible that Vale added them there to portray the intonation of viola caipira players, which does not follow the strict standards of Western European music. In the introduction, Vale explores a set of timbral distinctions by indicating how each pizzicato should be played. The plus sign is left-hand pizzicato, the M indicates middle finger, and the I and D indicates index finger. understanding of the Caipira and indigenous influences gives the performer an array of ideas for portraying the character of the celebratory piece. Prelude number 12 is titled Canto da Inhuma. Written sometime in the 1930s, this title translates to The Inhuman's Singing. This prelude is a representation of authentic Caipira music combined with the composer's love for the fauna of his country. The Inhuma is a bird that can be found in almost every Brazilian state, but mainly in the southeast and midwest regions of the country. The Inhuma is also present in Colombia, Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. The bird's beauty and unique call served as inspiration to many Brazilian poets and composers, including Vale. There are two important indications by the composer right below the prelude's title. First one is sem bravura, mimoso. Sem bravura means without bravura, and mimoso has several meanings in Portuguese. But the one that best describes the composer's intentions here is of delicate beauty, light, gracioso, enchanting. The next important indication he gives us is toada sertaneja, muito comum entre os violeiros. This indication refers to the improvised singing with simple melodies of sorrowful character, very common amongst viola caipira players. In the introduction, Vale indicates that the pizzicato should be played como guitarra, which translates to like a guitar. So instead of placing the violin on the shoulder, he indicates that the violin should be played like a guitar. This is an extended technique rarely used in Western European music, and Vale uses it to imitate viola caipira players. Another interesting aspect of this prelude is the use of two staves. It is possible that Vale used this as a reference to the call and response used in some Caipira songs. But it could also be a reference to the call and response between male and female Inuma birds. The combination of the bird call with Caipira elements create a uniquely beautiful mix of languages. The next prelude is number 15, Ao Pé da Fogueira, which translates to By the Bonfire. Written sometime in the 1930s, this is Vale's most famous prelude. And that is because violinist Jascha Heifetz somehow obtained the music for this work and made an arrangement for violin and piano, which was published in the United States in 1942 by Carl Fischer. This is the only prelude published in the United States. It is very likely that Vale came in contact with Heifetz during his tour in South America in 1934. Here is a sample of Heifetz's arrangement for violin and piano. Ao Pé da Fogueira portrays the festivities of June, when Brazilians celebrate St. John, St. Peter, and St. Anthony, as well as rural life and its traditions. The bonfire is a central element of this tradition, and it originates from an European pagan tradition where people celebrated the summer solstice in the northern hemisphere. For Brazilians, the bonfire symbolized protection from the bad spirits that hindered the plantation's prosperity. It was a celebration of abundant harvests. This prelude has a typical Caipira parallel thirds and sixths, and its theme resembles traditional dances around bonfires of the June festivities. The next prelude is number 24, titled Viva São João, which translates to Cheers to Saint John. Written sometime in the 1940s, this prelude was dedicated to violinist Isaac Stern, and it represents one of Brazil's biggest parties throughout the year, St. John's Day. June 24th is the day people celebrate St. John. This ritual is a mix of folk and Catholic traditions where people make bonfires, dance, play with fireworks, and eat corn-based foods. The traditional rhythms of São João, which are also associated with different dances, are forró, baião, shoti, chachado, and many others, and they all originate from the northeastern region of the country where I am from. In this prelude, Vale uses one of the most traditional rhythms of São João, baião. Baião is based on a syncopated duple meter rhythm, and it's usually in the standard ensemble. It is played by the instrument called zabumba. Zabumba is a flat, double-headed bass drum, played with a mallet in one hand and a stick in the other. And here is what Baião sounds like played on the zabumba. Even though Vale drew on rhythms from the Northeast, he kept some of the Southeastern Caipira tradition, such as the use of parallel six and the use of only two themes. In the antecedent of the A section, we find something unusual if compared with the other preludes, because here Vale writes 5 measures instead of the standard 4. And that is because he presents the main theme followed by 1 measure of Baião rhythm. Baião had a reputation of being lower-class music, which is similar to the reputation of Caipira music. Both genres stayed mostly unknown to the urban areas of Brazil until the mid-20th century. There are several qualities that make these preludes excellent pedagogical tools. First and foremost, they make use of a unique language that is not seen in any other repertoire for the violin. Besides that, Vale also makes extensive use of chordal texture, double, triple, and quadruple stops, extensive use of natural and false harmonics, different kinds of pizzicato, including como guitarra, extended techniques, and different kinds of bow strokes. These preludes are mostly monothematic and require a creative and improvisatory approach from the violinist. They also feature unusual sound qualities that imitate sounds of nature, which opens up a new realm of possibilities for the violinists who learn these works. I intend on teaching these preludes as etudes in my future studio because learning the 26 preludes is a great way of introducing a violinist to Brazilian music and will serve as a way of accomplishing a solid technique foundation. Vale is the only composer that tells the stories and traditions of the Caipira way of life through the violin. His contributions to the violin repertoire deserve a more prominent place on the world stage because they're not only emotionally intriguing pieces, but they also advance greatly the technique of the violin. His works go far beyond the popular high-fets arrangement of Ao Pé da Fogueira, and each prelude can only be fully understood when studied in the context of the full collection. These works mean a lot to me because I grew up with the sound of the guitar and the viola caipira, so performing them feels like celebrating a part of me. For that reason, I will be making a recording of all the 26 preludes to be released in a CD by the end of this year. And I also plan on publishing a score with English translations of the composer's notes. I plan on doing that in 3 years when these works become public domain. I believe that concert music should include music that celebrates different parts of humanity. Studying and embracing other cultures enriches our musical vocabulary and makes the concert stage much more representative of real life. I would like to express my gratitude to my committee members, Professor Rhodes, Dr. Bruns, Dr. Kremaski, Professor Requiro, and Dr. Nitsch for their help and support on this project. Thank you very much. I'd like now to open up for some questions.
Absolutely beautiful, Mariama.
Thank you.
Really great. I was wondering if you could just talk a little bit about this idea of lyrics and music. You know, the idea of the Caipira music. I think you mentioned something that the lyrics were almost more important than the melodic content, and that's why the music tends to be a little bit more repetitive so that it can highlight lyrics. I was just wondering if, when you're playing some of these preludes with the parallel thirds and sixths, if you're imagining any particular lyrics when you're playing.
Yeah, well, I don't particularly imagine lyrics, but I try to make the repetitions become somewhat a way of inciting my creativity, so ways of playing them differently, as if you were saying different words, I guess, but I don't necessarily think of lyrics.
have you come across any texts of actual words? This is more about curiosity, not so much about research, but just curious if there are any sample of Caipira texts that you've had in some of these songs that, I know you referenced saying that many of them have a sorrowful character?
Yes. Do you mean like the ones I have listened to? I'm sorry, don't.
Or any. I was just curious about any kind of words attached to the melodies.
You mean in the preludes or?
In any. Oh, in any. Yeah.
Not in the preludes necessarily, but the one that I presented as a sample of Caipira music, it actually talks about the First World War. So yeah, they're just sad about it and just expressing their worries about the world and explaining how it started and like how other countries got involved. So yeah, it's not a very happy
wow.
setting. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I was also, I don't mean to hog all the questions, but I was also just wondering a little bit about this Heifetz arrangement.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I have a couple of questions about it, but generally, I'm wondering how you, well, just your general feelings about that. I mean, on one hand, how cool that, Heifetz was attracted to one of these Preludes and made his own arrangement and recorded it and made it famous in America. But like any issue, there are usually pros and cons to things, right? I was wondering if you could express some of your feelings about that. Heifetz arrangement, good, bad, middle, anything that you might feel.
Oh, well, I think it's fantastic. I think it's great that he gave Vale a voice and made the arrangement and made it somewhat popular here. Even so that so much that when Perman went to Brazil too, he played this as an encore. I think what bothers me about it is that in the Carl Fisher website, for example, Vale's name is misspelled. So because he's not well known, but Heifetz is, I guess they didn't go far enough as to research what is this guy's actual name.
Yeah.
It's not particularly deep research, is it?
No, it's just it takes 2 seconds.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's sad. I mean, that's what bothers me about it.
I see.
Yeah.
And did so Vale never heard the arrangement of the piano, or did he?
I am not sure he did. Well, in his writings, he says he's ecstatic about the fact that Heifetz made the arrangement, and that he says it made me famous. But I'm not sure if he heard it. But he knew of the publication because he died 12 years after that.
Oh right.
Yeah.
You did say that.
And
I like very much what you said so many beautiful things you said in your conclusion about how concert life should reflect real life, and be representative of what we see in human nature. That is extremely beautiful. What you said. The only other last question, it's very small, is I was wondering if you could just say a few words about some of the artwork that you included in your slides.
Yeah, so all of these are from artists from the Northeast, mostly because I am from there, so that's my bias. But also because I selected preludes that did have the Caipira influence, but they also had another element. So the last two that we looked at, Viva São João and Ao Pé da Fogueira, have Northeastern elements. So that's why I chose those artworks from where I'm from.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, thanks.
What a fantastic job, Mariama. Such a beautiful combination of research and personal voice, and such a joyous celebration of this fantastic music that I personally, I'll speak for myself, would never have heard. And hearing what you say about sort of the roots of the music and what that represents, in addition to some of your pedagogical ideas about how to make this music living and breathing through playing and teaching.
Mm-hmm.
This is such a fantastic lecture recital. I just want to thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your help.
Does everybody have any?
Just one question. Yeah, loved the presentation. You mentioned about growing up in the Northeast and how you grew up with capoeira music, and I wonder if it was just something that was like part of your fabric of everyday life, like listening to this music, or were there particular festivals or occasions or places that you went to that you associate with this music?
Well, my father is a musician and he's also a professor of music. So I grew up with this music literally every day.
Wow.
So it's a very familiar genre, I guess.
That's wonderful. And are there particular occasions during the year that you would have?
Yeah. Well, so the San Juan, the Saint John's Day, is a huge party in the Northeast.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big celebrations we're always involved in. And I didn't particularly play, but my father did.
Can you give us an idea of what a day during that festival would have looked like for you?
So pre-COVID times, well, everyone makes a bonfire on the street, like in front of their house, and there's like fire. Well, when we were kids, we'd like play with fireworks, but usually there's like a lot of food, like corn. Based foods, a lot of forró, baião, and these other dances that I talked about. And as you could see in the artwork, there's like these decorations, like very colorful. Yeah.
Would you dance?
You mean like right now?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't express that very good. I mean, when you were a child, would you participate in the dance?
Yeah, I do love dancing forró. I don't know how to dance the other styles, but yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Does anybody else have any?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Someone said they're translating the composer's notes. Are there extensive notes on how to perform the preludes, or is it just like the single sentences?
Well, there is a few sentences, but there is also 3 pages where he wrote like very detailed what certain measures imitate in the preludes. So there is a whole list of like animals. He lists like all animals, like dog, from even dog, chickens, like everything that are incorporated into these preludes. He also makes notes about certain sounds that imitate like an old door opening. So like that's not in the current publication of these works. So I think it would be really nice to add them both in Portuguese and in English to make them more accessible.
Yeah, those aren't details. Those are
No.
hugely important
Yeah.
interpretive things from the composer.
Yes. Yeah. It's just very difficult. I'm waiting for it to become public domain. It's very difficult to access his family. I guess I would have to really travel to his hometown. And the manuscripts are not available in any library. So, yeah.
What a wonderful idea to travel to his hometown.
Yeah, I would love to
Yeah.
visit it. Yeah. As well as get to know their family, his family.
That would be such a wonderful trip to make,
Yeah.
and I hope very meaningful for
Oh,
them too.
absolutely. And one fun fact, he named all 3 of his children indigenous names.
Really?
So, yeah.
And was he received? You were mentioning some of these perceptions of this certain styles of music as being lower class or like
Yeah.
not as
Yeah.
elevated or whatever. Was he received with, were people sort of snobby about?
Well, so in his writings, there is a lot of his self-doubt as a composer. Not as a violinist, but as a composer. He didn't really believe in what he was putting out there. So I think that's why Haifet's arrangement made him feel much more confident. And there's also the fact that when he traveled to Rio, when I mentioned that he met Villa Lobos, his music wasn't actually very well accepted because they said it's too Caipira. It's
Too
too
rural.
rural, you know.
Yeah. And
But-
Villalobos was seen as more.
Well, Villalobos wanted to please the elite, but he did like Vale's music.
Yeah.
Wonderful and informative presentation.
Thank
I
you.
just had a question on that similar note. Is there any autobiographical or biographical information that might indicate what Vale's intentions were in writing these pieces? I mean, the most obvious answer to me might be that he wanted to encapsulate the very rich and varied musical styles of the northeastern region, but is there any indication of some other reasons as to why he wanted to just write these 26 preludes?
Well, yeah, there is no autobiographical. There is some like notes that he wrote in his personal journal, and there is also two published how do you say that, dissertations on his works and his life, but that's about it. Yeah, there is not much. I think getting in touch with his family would be the best resource.
Yeah. Mariama, that you mentioned his personal journals. Are they just like kind of diary entries or?
Yes, like diary entries.
Like, yes.
Yeah, and I only found out about them because of one of the dissertations written about this. Because again, they're not really in any library.
And they were referenced in the dissertation
Yes.
quoted in Portuguese?
Yes. Yeah.
This is a very small point, but I loved what you said about the just different ways of thinking the notation and different staves, and how you talked about that in terms of just violin talk, you know, like how you interpret that, and then also what you said about the call and response between male and female birds, and that just completely opened up the way I heard that. Was that an original thought that you had, or was that something that's been discussed in one of these dissertations?
No, that was my original thought by researching about the bird, actually. So, yeah, I found out that the male and female have this call and response. And there is call and response in some Caipira songs where both singers do that. But I thought, well, maybe since he grew up in the rural area, he heard the birds and was trying to imitate that.
Yeah. I've heard you play that prelude before, but after reading that in your paper and hearing you say it today, I completely listened to that prelude in a different way, like in a more spatial way, in a more conversational, you know, it sort of just takes it out of it. The idea of two staves really sort of teases it out that way. It's such a beautiful interpretation.
Yeah, thank you. I was really curious from the beginning because I was really struck by why two staves. He could have just written the left hand pizzicato as an eighth note in the same stave. So.
Yes.
Yeah, I just have one more question. This might seem like a silly kind of question, but does Caipira itself mean anything? Because I'm just thinking of other words that also have that first part.
Yeah, Caipira.
Is there any kind of link between these?
You mean like to the word Caipira?
Yeah.
Now it's escaping my mind, but it's in the paper. Something brass. That's what it means from like an indigenous dialect.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
Beautiful, Mariama.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.